Greetings and salutations, one and all. Welcome to the night shift. It's a brand spanking new week right here on KevinStew.com. On the night shift with DJ Kevin Stew. How are you? How are each and every one of you? Want to say big ups to those locked in right now, those on TuneIn Radio. The night shift with DJ Kevin Stew. Across the pond, One Harmony Radio. Top of the morning to you guys over there in the UK. King Genius, Queen Genius, big up. I'm gonna say big ups to those on WGLRO, the People Station, home of the Donnie Walker Morning Show, taking you from the sheets to the streets. Reaching out from Detroit to Denmark and everywhere in between. Want to say big ups to those on PEMGTV.com. Welcome. And of course, those tuning right here at KevinStew.com, home of the night shift to DJ Kevin Stew. Welcome. Glad to have you. Couldn't do it without you. And guess what? You have my word. I wouldn't even try.
Yo, Teddy, say what you want to say.
Something on my chest.
Kicking it off tonight with a little bit of Teddyson John
Can I say what I want to say?
and International Stevenson.
Yo, Teddy, say what you want to say.
It's International Steven. Yeah.
Something on my
It's called Vent.
I want to express it. Let me ask you a question. Can I say what I want to say? I want to say what I want to say. Can I say what I want to say? I really want to say it. People don't know you, but they won't judge you. They talking about you. Must be something about you. Smile in your face and talking you bad and making up things that far from the facts. Why you talking about me? Talking about me. I'll be pressing on, doing my thing. I'm telling you, please don't judge me. God don't put you to watch me. He don't like ugly, so tell them keep their eyes off me. Off of me. Off of me. Off me. Off of me. Keep on talking. Yo capale, vale, 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 vale. Yo vale, 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 vale. You think it easy? They bad mind and envy. Take a walk in my shoes, then let me hear you. They play insane and talking you bad and talk go bring talk that far from the facts. Why you talking about me? Talking about me. I'll be pressing on, doing my thing. I'm telling you, please don't judge me. God don't put you to watch me. He don't like ugly, so tell them keep their eyes off me. Off of me. Off me. Off of me. Keep on talking. Yo capale, vale, 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 vale. Yo vale, 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 vale. Can I say what I want to say? I wanna say what I want to say. Can I say what I want to say? I really wanna say it. At the back of your mind, you want to say this sometimes. Let me say what I want to say. I really wanna say it. I'm begging you, please don't judge me. God to put you to watch me. He don't like ugly, so tell them keep their eyes off me.
It's called Vent.
Off of me.
Please don't judge me. God didn't put you here to watch me.
Yo capale,
So keep your eyes off of me. Citizen John working out with International Steven.
keep on talking. Yo capale, vale, 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 vale.
I want to say thanks to Pulse Media Group for sponsoring this segment of the show.
Yo vale.
Pulse Media Group can take care of everything that you see right here on kevinstew.com. They can host your website, they can create your website, they can provide streaming services on your website. If you want to take it a step further and have your own channel, Pulse Media Group can hook you up with that too. They've hooked up schools, churches, businesses, broadcast stations, you name it. Give them a call, 754-999-6020, or visit them at pulsemg.com. I want to say thanks to Althea LSU and her heavenly healing hands. Althea is a licensed massage therapist that operates out of Broad County, North Miami-Dade, and South Palm Beach counties. She comes to you, brings her table, her oils. She only asks that you get her off her table when she's done. So many people have fallen asleep, yours truly included. Give her a call, 954-655-9000. You'd think I'd know this number by now, right? 954-655-9000. Or email her at thealater@att.net. Althea, please forgive me.
I really wanna say it. I'm begging you, please.
Say thanks to Reggae Global Entertainment. They take care of our third segment.
So tell them keep their eyes on.
They can operate as your booking agents. Take care of your legal service referrals, trademarks, publishing, copyrights, legal contracts, biographies, and so much more. Give them a call, 954-998-8034. And of course, big ups to GMAT Music Solutions. They usually take care of my musical therapy.
Can I say what I want to say? I wanna say what
They provide sound, light, stage production services, musical equipment, musicians, singers, engineers, PA systems, you name it.
you want to say.
Whatever you need to bring your event to life.
To say what I want to say. I really
Give them a call, 754-307-GMAC.
don't judge me.
That's 754-307-4622.
Like I
Or you can visit them at gmatmusicsolutions.com. You can also do your online shopping there. They're Amazon affiliates.
offer me. Keep on talking. Yo, ballet, 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 ballet.
For those listening in on TuneIn Radio, if you want to participate tonight actively, you can call, you can text 773-789-STEW. That's 773-789-7839. You can even WhatsApp to that number. But of course, I ask you to jump into the stew pot. What is that, you might ask? Oh, let's call it a chat room. Over here on the night shift and on kevinstew.com. We're very fancy. We call it the stew pot. It's where we keep things bubbling. And come on in. The water is always fine. Believe me. Ask those that are already in. Right now I have the privilege of introducing to you the newest night shift family member. Because after one visit you're a family member, you're no longer a guest. Just so that you know, don't get it twisted, lady. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the one and only. Yep. Yes, it is her. You see that? You see that face? You see that face? That face. Yeah, I'm pointing the wrong way. Yeah, that face right there. Ladies and gentlemen, Heather Campbell Stobbs.
Hi. Thank you very much for the introduction. How are you tonight?
I am well. Thank you very much.
Great. That is wonderful.
And getting better by the moment. If there's
Well,
one,
I was just going to say I appreciate you so much inviting me to speak about this. So
well, I appreciate love that you took the time out to do it. You know,
you're welcome.
I've been talking about this issue for a little while now. I had the privilege of having David Fisher really introduce this whole subject to me.
Right.
And David is just a phenomenal guy.
Hmm.
You know, I don't know how he keeps his facts in his head and they don't leak out, they don't change, they don't, they just stay. And
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
he's been amazing as he works with I I can't even say as he works with the team because David alone is a team.
Hmm. Yeah, this is true.
but
um,
but when people
yeah.
like you show up, and I want to thank um a Twitter friend of mine for pointing me in your direction
Hmm.
because she said to me, "Have you spoken to Heather?" And I'm like, "Who is Heather?" She's like, "Yeah, you might want to talk with her."
Yeah. It's just, you know, I think that sometimes things are put in your life that you have to deal with, and you just decide, whether you're going to take a stand on something or not.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the murder of my cousin was one of those things, and then the ensuing, the trial and what I believe to be an injustice,
Mm.
with the conviction of Rodney Reed in the murder of my cousin.
Your cousin
So
Stacey Stites.
yes, my cousin is Stacey Stites, um, and she is, the way we're related. People often ask about that. My father and Stacy's mother are siblings, are
Right.
brother and sister, and so that's how the relation is there. And Stacy was, about 9 or 10 years younger than me. And so, when we were younger, we saw each other a lot. And as we got older, we didn't see each other as much. Like I grew up, got married and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Just kind of like what you do. So we would see each other, during the holidays and some things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
we grew up together down in Corpus. That's where she was born, and they lived for quite a while, just right around the corner from my parents and brother and I. And so it was, like I would either walk over there or they would walk over to our house. It wasn't, but I don't know, 4 houses apart, I guess. Um, and so, like, you never think that something like this is going to happen in your family.
Right.
And then once you get over the shock of that and you put your trust in the state to be sure that, they have the person that truly committed the crime, and then just to learn of all these, the crazy stuff like that David Fisher was even talking about. I mean, he has, um, just a really in-depth knowledge of the case from start to finish. I mean, I can hear a name of somebody and not recognize it and call him and ask him, and he automatically knows exactly who I'm talking about and what their connection to the case is. It's
Right.
just really impressive. But, to I guess it's just you don't think it's going to happen in your family, and then you especially think that everything is going to work out the way it's supposed to, and you don't expect there to be just like he was saying. I listened to his talk on your show,
Mm-hmm.
and he's right. It seems so convoluted. Like it's kind of like you can't make it up. Like
Yeah.
it's just crazy. Um, so anyway, so Stacy and I grew up together, and like I said, we just kind of went our separate ways. I became an adult and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I just remember. I'm just going to kind of start at the beginning when I found
Sure.
out first that she was missing. She was due to be married to Jimmy Fennell
Right.
within a few weeks. Our family was going to go up and go to their wedding and have like the big family thing and all that.
Right. Right.
And my mom called me my mom had gotten home from work and gave me a call, and she said, Heather, Stacey's missing. And I'm like, whatever, no, they just like, they can't find her. Not like she's missing seriously. I just thought like she was maybe out of pocket, and just nobody could get a hold of her.
Right.
And she said, no, I have a message on the answering machine from your Aunt Carol. She called and said, it's not a joke. It's serious. They can't find Stacey. She was supposed to report to work early in the morning. I want to say it was like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And HEB called your aunt at 6:30 to let her know that Stacey hadn't gotten there yet. And I asked her, knowing that the wedding was coming up, and that can be stressful. So I said, well, are they sure that she and Jimmy didn't go off and elope? So that was like my second thought was, first of all, y'all are wrong. And then secondly, did they elope? And she said, no, that Jimmy was there, but that Stacey wasn't there. And so, and of course said, that she had gotten up and left for work at the normal time and all that kind of stuff, which, found out later that he claimed he was asleep during that whole time. And I guess nobody thought that was weird until after the fact. But so I'll get to that.
Okay, I was about to say, but yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I guess it was a couple of hours past. I went and picked up my son from daycare and all that kind of stuff. And my mom said, you need to come over to the house. So, we went by, and she said, your aunt called back and they found her. And I'm like, relieved. I'm like, oh, okay. So, where was she? She said, no. They apparently took a helicopter up. I guess a guy had, I think the story was that a man had pulled over on the side of the road looking for wildflowers for his wife, because it was April, like into April in Texas. And during that time is when all the wildflowers are blooming.
Oh, okay.
And so he had pulled over like into this area and noticed her there and reported it. And I guess that they had sent like a helicopter up and sent, cars out and everything, patrol cars and the medical examiners, coroner's office and all that kind of stuff there. And we were just stunned. Like it was just kind of like, I don't know. It was the strangest thing to experience, and especially to experience from a distance, because we weren't around. By this time, Carol and Stacey are living up in Giddings, and we're all still living in Corpus. And so, of course, her sisters, my other cousins, went up there and went up when they found out that she was missing. And so, we weren't there experiencing it there in Giddings. We're just kind of like having phone calls and messages.
Right, you're getting secondhand information and stuff.
Yeah. And so I remember still thinking, like, even when we were driving up to go to the service, to go to the memorial service that they had up there in Bastrop, and driving up, we're all talking about our memories of her and, just stuff that you have as family. And, like, do you remember that time, she did this? And,
Right.
And so we got there, and it was just surreal being around my Aunt Carol without Stacey around, because Stacey was the youngest out of all of them, and she hadn't moved out yet. So even like when we would see them at family gatherings, Stacey's always there. Like we go over to Carol's house at Thanksgiving when Stacey was, I guess, about 15 or whatever, and Stacey's there. So like whenever you saw Carol at a family gathering, Stacey was there.
Right.
And that was the first experience I had ever had, from the time she was born, of Stacey not being around. And I remember that was actually when I met Jimmy Fennell. We hadn't met him, um, because we were just going to go up and meet him before the wedding. Um, and so going up and meeting him like that, of course, we gave our condolences and everything, and he didn't say anything. I mean, he didn't say a whole lot. Um, he didn't really seem completely grief stricken or anything, and we all wrote that off to being in shock.
In shock, yeah.
Yeah. And also, I think that we felt at the time, because we even talked about how hard it must be to be a law enforcement officer and have something like that happen to a loved one and not having been able to protect her.
Right.
So our assumption was that he was dealing with all that, and his parents were there. We met his parents. They were, they just kind of stuck to him like glue. And I can see that, because if it were my son,
Mm-hmm.
I would do the same thing,
Right.
Um, and a lot of people don't realize this, but there were actually 2 services that were held. One was up in Bastrop, because she was working at the Bastrop HEB. And so one was up in that area, but there was actually a graveside ceremony down in Corpus Christi.
Mm.
And she's buried down there in the same cemetery with her dad. And so and there was a lot of people at that service as well. The one that was up at the church in Bastrop, though, it was packed. And there were just people everywhere. And I remember getting up and walking around, actually, because like I watch crime shows, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm remembering that they say that very often someone who does something like this, like the perpetrator, will
Will show
actually
up.
will show up. And so I don't know what I thought. I was convinced that, like, I would, if I went up and stood over on the side and kind of looked, at everybody that was there, I would be able to figure out who it was. I don't know what kind of idiocy that was, but I was convinced that I would be able to pinpoint them. And I remember standing up and looking, and how you can tell, very often, just by the way a person might be standing, that they're either ex-military or they're law enforcement, right?
Right.
And ever so often, you would see a guy standing there in the midst of all this crowd, and you could actually figure, like, okay, that's an officer, and that's an officer, and you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so they were all there interspersed throughout. And even at the one down in Corpus, law enforcement officers showed up. And, we all knew who, like they all knew who the different family members were, but they would watch people. And I remember one guy kind of standing, and he knew me, but my husband hadn't gone to the funeral in Bastrop. My husband went to the graveside service in Corpus.
Right.
And he, we remember this guy. I walk up to my husband, and he says, "Why does that guy keep looking at me?" And I was like, "Who?" And I kind of looked around, and I said, "Well, he was at the funeral up in Bastrop too. I think he's a law enforcement officer." And then it's like, after I walked up and talked to my husband, and like the guy figured out there was a connection, then he wasn't like, mean mugging my husband anymore.
Mm.
So my husband and I have talked about that, and he was like, "Man, they thought they considered me a suspect." And at that time, they considered everybody a suspect.
Right.
Because they had no clue. And so we kind of, it was a while later that my aunt actually ended up moving back down to the Corpus area, after Stacey had passed away, because there was only, I had an uncle and another aunt that lived up there, but other than that, there wasn't anybody really there.
Mm-hmm.
And her other kids lived in Corpus, so she just moved back down there.
Right.
But, we just kind of floated along with, I'd call my mom and say, have you heard anything from Carol? Is there anything on the case? And there was nothing for a long time. And so we weren't aware of all the ins and outs or anything like that was going on. And I just remember at one point I even called and talked to one of the investigators there at the sheriff's office, because I just wanted to know, I had only heard things through my mom secondhand, and I wanted to know what was going on. And they didn't really have any leads. And this was at the time, I think, that they were doing DNA tests on, like ex-boyfriends and like male acquaintances
Right.
and different things like that. And so, lo and behold, my mom calls me one day and says, your aunt called and they have a DNA match in the case, in Stacey's case, and they've arrested somebody. And I said, well, who is it? And she had written down the name, and she said, it's Rodney Reed. And me, at the time, because you're thinking, oh, well, they have DNA, so that's a slam dunk, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Open and shut.
and exactly. And she even said, well, apparently he's saying that that they had been dating. And I was like, oh yeah, whatever. That's what they all say when there's DNA, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
because that's, when people say that, and then a person says, well, we actually had a consensual relationship, everybody rolls their eyes
Right.
and says, whatever, that's what he said. Good luck, and also, well, we're in Texas, so he's going to get the death penalty. They've got DNA. He apparently did it. He's lying about a relationship, and he's going to get the death penalty.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this. It's like an express lane
Right.
here in Texas. So,
Mm-hmm.
And so because by this time I was living in San Antonio, and I wanted to be able to keep track of what all was going on. Like when he was going to court, if, whatever was going on. And people laugh, but you got to remember, this is back, like, she was murdered in 96. So I think Reed was arrested in 97 and the trial was in 98 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at the time, you could set a stupid Google alert, and people laugh at me because it shows my age. But you could go in and you could set a Google alert, and you would get an alert to your email anytime, like this, a certain combination of whatever you put in
Mm-hmm.
came up, right?
Right.
So what I had put in was Stacey Stites, Jimmy Fennell, Rodney
Rodney
Reed.
Reed. Mm.
And so that's how, like, I knew when the trial was going on. And so I would get an email alert, and it would be like an article in the Statesman. And, I would read about what all was going on. And they said that, he was convicted and it was a capital murder case, and the jury had sentenced him to death. And I, like, went on about my life. And so, a few years later, because he had like little hearings here and there that I would read about.
Right.
So I'm thinking, okay, we're all good. And at the time, I got to say, I was a huge pro death penalty advocate. Like a hardcore. You kill somebody,
You deserve to
that's
die.
it. You deserve to die.
Mm.
And so, like I said, sometimes you have things put in your life that make you change your whole perspective, right?
Right.
So this was mine. And so we got an alert, and I think it was when the article had been written by Jordan Smith called "Who Killed Stacey Stites," and I thought that it was going to be like an article that talked about how did Rodney Reed get to the point in his life where he killed my cousin. That's what I thought I was going to be reading about, kind of like almost an expose or something on, I was expecting to read something about how, like, he grew up and, like, like a real hard neighborhood,
Right.
and he was abused, or he was in foster care, whatever. Like, that's what I'm expecting to read, that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm expecting it to be this big sob story about, kind of like poor Rodney Reed. This is how his life evolved, and this is all the horrible abuse that happened to him. And so I was going to learn about him because I wanted to know why he killed my cousin. And so I start reading the article, and that is not all at all like what it is, right? It's kind of this explanation of how everything came about, and it's actually questioning whether he really did it or not.
Mm.
N- Not what I was expecting at all. Not what I was expecting at all. And so I actually kind of just put it down and was just like, no, I don't even want to hear about that, because it was rocking with my whole
Right. It's like it's going contradictory to what you already believed.
yes. Oh yeah, yeah. Because I was like, no, this is mm-mm. Like I said at the beginning that he was lying about having a relationship with her. And so put it down. Well, then a few years later, I realized that there is that documentary that was done by Ryan Polomsky and Frank Bustos, that is State versus Reed.
Right.
And they were the film students. And so then I start reading that, and I make a connection like, okay, wait a minute. So Jordan Smith, who's talking on here, is the Jordan Smith that wrote the article that I read. So then I was a little bit more like, I had been super close minded and pushed it open a little bit. Um, and some of the things that she mentioned, for example, that Jimmy Fennell had said, oh no, she got up she got up and she got dressed, and she went to work that morning, from the apartment, and I don't, she left the apartment safely. And then when they said, well, so what time did you go to sleep? And he's like, well, I went to sleep about 11. Well, did you wake up? Well, no, I didn't wake up, but that's the time she always left. And so when you start looking at, and I know there's a lot of people that say that Jimmy Fennell was just really looked at as a suspect. And I call BS on that, because they didn't even go in and search the apartment that they
Hmm.
lived in together. And David had talked about this the other night, or well, I guess it was a few months ago when he was on with you.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about how my aunt um, lived in a downstairs apartment, and then Jimmy and Stacey stayed upstairs.
Upstairs. Right.
So they weren't upstairs directly above her. They were one over. So it was one of those that has like two bottom and two top
Right.
apartments.
Yeah.
And so she lived in one on the bottom, and they lived diagonally from her on the top. And and so, my aunt saw them run upstairs that night, and Jimmy saying, "Oh yeah, like she was here," and it's some kind of baloney story, like, "Oh yeah, we took a shower together." And I don't remember if David mentioned this part, but his story was they had taken a shower together, and then they were laying on bed, and he was giving her a back massage, and they were talking about all the details of the wedding. Okay, I married my high school sweetheart.
Mm-hmm.
All he cared about with that wedding was, when do I need to get there? Just tell me the time and tell me what to wear. He didn't care about the details. Are you married, Kevin?
I've done the whole wedding bit. I've done
You,
it.
did you care? Did you ever
Listen.
discuss?
I didn't really care, but I had to be involved. I couldn't get away from it. I kind of had to be involved. It was a big Christmas Day event, family event culminated into a wedding event, and it was this massive production.
So when you say you had to be involved, did you initiate all that involvement?
Oh
Or
no.
you had to be involved like she told you you were going to be
Yeah.
involved? Yeah.
That's how that went.
That's how it goes most times.
Yeah.
But not in this case. They took a shower together and he rubbed her back and it was just like it was total talk about the wedding that was coming up. Bull. Nobody believes that. The only people that believed that were the ones that believed him.
Hmm.
I mean that, yeah. Um,
But I
that
didn't
makes me
hear
roll
that.
my eyes.
What I did hear was that there was a bit of an argument that night.
Yeah, with the whole meatloaf thing and stuff.
Oh, I didn't know what it
Was
was about. I just knew that there was a little bit of an argument that night.
y- yes, and so, but that wasn't Jimmy's story. See, Jimmy's story was that they went upstairs, they took a shower, he rubbed her back and gave her a massage, and they talked about the wedding. And then I think he went and watched TV and fell asleep on the couch at 11. She went ahead and went to sleep because she had to be up early to go to work,
Right.
but he didn't hear her leave. So,
As a cop.
um, yeah, he's the cop.
But he didn't hear
He's
her leave.
right. Just yeah, that doesn't give me a warm fuzzy feeling.
Hmm.
And the other thing that they talked about in State versus Reed was the fact that the apartment was never searched.
Right.
And what bothers me about that is you have to either believe one or two of two things. You either have to believe that the guy in charge of the investigation, the Texas Ranger, Rocky Wardlow,
Mm-hmm.
is either incompetent and didn't search the apartment, or because he was one of Jimmy's friends and ran in that group of cops, that he knew what he would find in the apartment and didn't want to have to take it all down as evidence.
Mm.
Like that there could have been signs of a struggle, all that kind of business. The other thing that I don't think that he wanted to go into the apartment about, because I don't think he's incompetent. So I think that he knew darn good and well what he was going to find if he went in there. And not only that, he wouldn't have been able to go in there by himself. He would have had, like, there would have been other officers with him. So
Right.
there's no way that he could have covered up anything. Like, they would have all seen what they would have seen, and he would have had to write it all down
Right.
and take note of it. Because I think that what they would have seen is that her clothing wasn't, like, there was items missing of hers that should have been in the apartment, but that weren't because they were found in the truck when it was parked at the high school, and then subsequently found
The
in the
dumpster.
dumpster.
Yeah.
Right. Um, so, I'm watching that State versus Reed, and I'm just kind of thinking, okay, well, all these things that they're saying, they make sense. Now, I will say one thing that people have talked about is that when like, I guess when they did the autopsy, um, that they talk about like her fingernails were cut like super, super short,
Mm-hmm.
like with nail clippers cut short.
Yeah.
And my recollection of Stacey is that she always had her nails cut short. I do know that looking at the pictures that I've seen of her nails, there are a couple of them that seem like they're cut shorter than what they would typically be, because it almost looks like they're cut down into the quick.
Mm.
So I'm not sure about that, but there's just lots of things that just really don't make sense to me. Um, in regards to the way the investigation was handled. And I'm not by any stretch, like, I'm not in law enforcement. I was a pre-K teacher, right? Like, that's what I
Okay.
did.
Yeah.
I taught kindergarten and pre-K. So all I know about it is what seems logical to me. Um, so and the bags of clothes, ever since I discovered about the bags of clothing, that has bothered me. It just seems that there were multiple things um, that investigators could have hit on that they didn't. And I'm not even saying, I'm saying like it was best investigative practice at the time that it occurred. I'm not comparing it to 2020, like 2019, 2020.
Hmm.
This is what they should have done.
Right.
But it's been best practice since law enforcement began that when you're missing somebody, you go look in the place where they were last known to be alive and healthy.
Right.
That wasn't done. They didn't go look in the apartment. That's the last place she was known to be alive and healthy because my aunt saw him go upstairs.
Mm.
And no one laid eyes on her after that. I mean, like my aunt, like no third party person saw her after that. Um, and
So,
so
okay, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was gonna
No,
ask you, you know, but I'm kind of, we're kind of going fast forward.
I know, and I didn't mean to. It's just like, yeah. So back me up if you need to and ask me what I need to say to fill in for you guys.
No, I think I would be going a little bit fast forward because I was gonna ask you if, since she went to work at that time of the morning,
Hmm.
if she was the kind of person that would stop and pick up a stranger on the way. Because that
No,
was the argument.
right, right. And okay, I don't know. Like my husband was in the military and he drilled into my head, don't go anywhere in that car without it being locked,
Right?
right? And as a woman, that is the first thing that you do. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
now I will say, I'm gonna put a caveat on that. I don't know if in the truck that she had, I don't know if it all, um,
It,
like if it
central
had
locking?
power locks,
Mm.
right? I don't know if it had that, but to me, logically, if she's going to work and she's going to get in the driver's side,
That's the only door that would be unlocked.
right? Because it was parked at the apartment. Now, I mean, I'm not sure how comfortable they were with stuff. I think it's very unusual. Um, I would not. Now, I will say that at the time, back in 1996, that was like the thought was that because everybody believed Jimmy that she left at 3:30 or that she left at 3 or whatever time it was typically.
Mm.
Everybody believed him at the time. So the only thing that could have happened for her to disappear between between the apartment and HEB, which is like it's like a Winn-Dixie or something or like a
Right.
Kroger's,
Right.
um she had to have been overtaken by somebody. But because like the truck ended up parked at the high school with no Stacy in it. So they just deduced that, oh, okay, well, she was fine in the apartment. She left for work. So something happened to her on the way. And, at the time, I mean, it, you know, I think that we were just really learning and hearing a lot about carjackings and things like that. And so it wasn't a stretch to think that that was indeed what had happened to her. But that was all based on people thinking that what Jimmy said, which was, well, yeah, she went to work at this time. Like no one knew that Jimmy was asleep. We all assumed that she went to work got up and went to work like she usually did
Right.
because that's what he said. Like you know, nobody thought that. And then with him being a police officer, you would think that he would have impressed upon her to have those doors locked.
Yeah,
So,
and that day was also 1 year to the day that they met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So her leaving to go to work at that time of the morning, there would at least have been a see you later, goodbye, um, I'll miss you, happy
Right.
anniversary, something. Not
Yeah.
just leave like a stranger in the night, you know.
Exactly. I mean, even now, if I get up and go to work super early, I tell my husband I'm leaving,
Right.
you know, and
Yeah.
he kind of goes, "Oh yeah, well, whatever." But I mean, he remembers it, you
Right.
know.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so yeah, it's just kind of after the fact. There's some things that that didn't make sense,
Yeah.
you know. And I think that we just gave the benefit of the doubt a lot, you know, just considering what we thought he was going through, like what we thought he was dealing with. Um, you know, and so, but yeah, like with the thing that I never understood about the clothes is when I first had it explained to me, with it was David Fisher that I was communicating with, and he said, well, you know, one officer came by at 5:30 in the morning and saw the truck, shined his flashlight in the truck, saw the bags of belongings there,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I guess kind of like I think he like wrote it down on a piece of paper. He leaves, right? Well, when they realize that that truck has something to do with the missing fiance of the police officer, they go back and belongings are missing out of the truck, like the bags have been put in the dumpster.
Right.
And the part that I've never understood about that is it's one of the things that I question, um, because it seems like it seems inconsequential. But my part of that is why would anybody do that? If you're a stranger and you've overtaken her
Mm-hmm.
and you've dumped the truck there, when the cop drives up and is shining his light, why aren't you hightailing it? Why are you going to stay there and pull the clothes out and put
And
them
then
in the
put it in a
dumpster? It
dumpster.
doesn't make sense.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. And so that is one thing that has always bothered me. And it was funny the other day when I listened to David on your show when he said this doesn't make sense, and I was like I'm listening to it and I'm like talking to my phone when I'm watching.
Yeah.
I'm like, right, that doesn't make sense. Thank you very much.
Right.
Um, but so yeah, and so with David, the way that because I kind of felt like I didn't know how to get information. Um, Not really about the case, but I mean like information like about the investigation.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know how to get information about, you know, the trial or, you know, the DNA and things like that. And so, you know, like I had said earlier, I had that handy dandy Google alert. And so I was reading some articles and I started reading comments. And there was some comments by, in the article, and I don't remember what publication it was, but there were comments, and my aunt had made some comments based on the information in the article and, you know, other things that people had commented because I think people were the questioning Reed's guilt.
Right.
And so my aunt had made some comments on there, and someone questioned, like, was that really Stacey's mom? And David Fisher commented on there and said, yeah, this is Stacey's mom. I can assure you it's Carol Stites. You know, I've talked with her before, you know, we've had conversations, blah, blah, blah. And so at the time you could email, like you could click on somebody's
The link. Yeah.
the
The
link,
name. Yeah.
right? And you could send an email. And so I just sent an email because I realized who it was because he was in that State versus Reed one. And I remember watching State versus Reed, and he's got like these files and
Mm-hmm.
like file boxes, and I was like, okay, he's got stuff. So
Right.
I was like, that I need stuff. He's got stuff because by now I'm kind of thinking, well, maybe I want to find out what people are saying. Um, And so, yeah, so I did. I emailed him and just asked him, I said, I'm Stacey Stites' cousin, and I have some questions because I'm really, and I told him like where I found his, information. And I was like, I just kind of want to know what's going on, and what you think. And the floodgates opened.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, I was so he was incredibly patient with me because we exchanged phone numbers. And the first time I called him, I think we were on the phone together probably 6 hours.
Yeah, he
And
has a tendency to do that, and you don't know that that amount of time would go by.
no clue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I would say, okay, like he would say, so this is what we think. And I'm like, right. And he explained to me how he got involved, and that made sense. And so
Right.
I said, I'm like, well, what about this? And he would answer, and then it would, okay, well, what about this? It was kind of like going into a rabbit hole on the
Right.
web, where you're like, okay, like 5 hours have gone by and I don't even realize it. Um, but he was so knowledgeable about it, and he was so patient about explaining it to me. And he asked me some questions, like about even like family dynamics and stuff like that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, he even said like, well, did you grow up with Stacy? Are you guys the same age? And all this. And so one thing that I do think, because my family, well, my aunt Carol and Stacy's sisters are, and some other family members are extremely upset with me. I'm not the only like extended family member that thinks that at the very minimum that Rodney Reed should get a new trial. Um, there's several of us that believe that. Um, but I've spoken out the most about it.
Yeah.
And I think they feel betrayed, and that I don't honor, um, that I'm not honoring Stacy's memory by being open about my feelings. But my thing is this, is that at the end of the day, um, with this case, if there's all these questions about Rodney Reed's guilt,
Guilt.
where they're saying, he's guilty, if there's all these questions, how is that serving justice to Stacy?
Yes. That's a
You
very good
know,
question right there.
it's not like it's not okay. I mean, she was buried in the wedding dress that she was supposed to wear when she married Jimmy Fennell. If he killed her, they've buried her. Well, I'm convinced that he killed her, but that sucks. She's
Mm.
buried in the wedding dress.
Yeah.
Like,
Uh,
that's awful.
did anything unusual happen at any of the services, the funeral services?
Um, not not so far as I remember anything unusual happening at the funeral services.
Yeah.
I just He just seemed very standoffish. His dad is like real gregarious, like kind of boisterous,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of guy. And he's kind of a big guy. His dad is, um, but he was just kind of there, and it was almost like he was overwhelmed with the amount of people that were there, um, because like my family, we're not a quiet family, um, and it just, how like you have somebody that's maybe at a gathering and they're just kind of uncomfortable with being around that many people in the first place.
Right.
Um, he was like that. And I remember my mom saying afterwards, um, like that evening, she said, I didn't talk to him a lot. He didn't seem like he talked to very many people. And I'm like, right. But you could tell like there were people that he was comfortable with. Like he was very comfortable with Stacy. He seemed comfortable with Stacy's sisters. He seemed comfortable with Herschel, which was one of Stacy's sisters' husbands.
Okay.
So, so you could tell that he had built some relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
we were extended family that had never met him before. So I don't expect him to come up to me and chat me up all day, right?
Right, right.
Um, he just seemed, I guess, and we figured like anyone would that he would rather be anywhere else than exactly where he was, and we attributed it to what all he was going through. But found out afterwards that he is kind of like didn't really have a lot of close friends, and um, kind of not. I'm not going to say socially awkward because that's not what I mean, and it's not really introverted, but just kind of like
He keeps to
if
himself
you,
a bit.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um, but I remember my mom saying, he's kind of an odd duck, and
Mm.
I was just like, do you think so? And she said, yeah, I kind of do. And I was like, oh. And she's like, well, maybe it's just, with everything going on, but he just seemed kind of odd. I'm like, yeah, I can see that. And then I remember it was a few months later that my mom had talked to my aunt, Carol, and Jimmy had already started, like he had already started dating somebody. And my mom told me that Carol had said that he seemed to be having a hard time because, um, like, he was always, I guess he was kind of like stalking this girl a little bit, like she worked wherever she worked, he'd pull up and he'd park outside and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And I say, me trying to be like Miss Positive Intent, well, it's got to be kind of hard, I mean, because he wasn't able to protect Stacey very well, so that's got to be hard on him. And I mean, and he's probably kind of lonely, so he started dating. So like I start making excuses, right? Like,
Right.
no, he's not a stalker. It's just that like maybe he feels like he should have protected Stacey better, so he
So he's
wants to
gonna
make
protect
sure
this
that
one.
right. So he's going to park outside her work, make sure she gets to her car okay. Yeah, I didn't know. Completely naive. No, basically, he's very violent and stalking. Like it come to find out, I guess he had physically assaulted this girl and all that. We didn't know that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like we didn't get all those details. I don't know if my aunt had those details and didn't share that, or if she didn't know either. Um, but just in the interim, some things have come up. Like one of Stacey's friends that she went to high school with, uh, her name's Tammy, and because I've asked her, did you ever meet,
Jimmy.
Jimmy,
Mm-hmm.
and all that kind of stuff? She's like, no, I didn't really meet him. They had moved, and I think one time they were. She had said that she was talking to Stacey on the phone, and they were making some plans. I think they were going to go to do something in Smithville or whatever. And he came in and hung up the phone, like while they were talking in
Mm.
conversation, and like just hung the phone up. So it hung up on Tammy. And then Stacey's tires were slashed. So
Hmm.
she couldn't go
She can't
anywhere.
go anywhere. Right.
Right.
How
And
coincidental.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So anyway, it just kind of has evolved into this where you find out more and more, about Jimmy doing some things like that, and just the fact that they really didn't
They
they
really didn't
didn't
do a
really
proper investigation in the beginning.
they didn't, and not just that. I mean, he even, I know the polygraph is not admissible, but he failed it twice when they asked him, did you kill Stacey? You know, he took two, he failed on that question both times, and then lawyered up.
Right. And
So,
it's funny because people are asking, so why does Rodney Reed refuse to take a polygraph test? Well, why should he need to? If Jimmy failed his twice
right,
and nothing came of it,
exactly,
is Rodney going to pass his and something come of it?
exactly.
doesn't seem likely. So
Mm-mm.
I'm right there with Rodney with not taking the polygraph. In addition, all the other things that have come to light,
Right.
with DNA popping up,
Hmm.
the recognition of 2 or 3 spermazoa, when if she was raped and
Hmm.
killed by Rodney that night, then
Right.
there should have been a whole lot more.
Exactly. And that's one of the things. I was asked to do. I did an interview with A&E,
Yes.
when they did that dead man walking thing or whatever it was, and I remember going to or dead man talking. I remember going up and meeting Kevin Gannon, and after we had done, the sitting at the table part and everything like that, he pulled me over to the side and said, "I want to share something with you." And I was like, "What?" Um, because I always felt, even though I was saying that I believed Rodney Reed needs a new trial, because I do believe that. I don't believe that they should just totally exonerate him and have him walk. And he doesn't even want that. He's even said he doesn't want that. He wants to clear his name. So
Right.
I think they should do a new trial. But what he said to me was, "I know that you believe that Jimmy Fennell killed your cousin, and I think you're right, and this is why. You could have knocked me over." I like this was someone from law enforcement that had investigative experience. He knows what he's talking about,
Hmm.
investigated all kinds of homicides. He said, "She died before midnight." And I was like, "Tell me how you know." And we must have sat there for another 30 or 45 minutes with him explaining to me, like looking at the photographs from autopsy, looking at the film that was taken when they removed her, when they removed her body, all
Hmm.
that stuff. And he was like, "It does not make sense. She died. She was dead longer than they think. There is no way that she died when they said she did." And so I was so relieved to hear that. And then he said, "Another thing is," he said, they only found they found a very limited amount of sperm.
Hmm.
And I'm like, "Right." And he said, "When someone is raped and murdered, not all that goes away. They should have found numerous, like millions, like the slide should have been like full of them,
Yeah.
and they didn't. And that means that they were old, and they had already started to like detach and all that kind of stuff."
Hmm.
And he's like, "And there was not very many of them. And that's how you know that that was done consensually. That it was not,
Mm.
let me rephrase, it was not contemporaneous with her death.
Mm.
So it didn't happen at the same time."
Right.
And and so that's when I was like, "Okay." Um, and I really started speaking out a lot more. One thing, and I'm not sure if David talked about it the other night, because I know that he talked about, or months ago, he talked about a lot of stuff that has to do with his. Um, and so one thing that we were always told, that Rodney Reed and Stacey were strangers to each other.
Hmm.
That's what I've been told her family, like her sisters and mother, believe, and all this kind of stuff. But one thing that's interesting, I feel, is that I went to my aunt, um, in, I guess it was 2014. It was either 2014 or 2015, to talk to her uh, about me thinking that Reed needed a new trial, and I wanted to talk to her about it because I didn't want her to be blindsided. And when I went to her, one of the first things I asked her, I sat down and we kind of discussed it, and I said, I just, I want you to understand, like I just feel like there's a lot of questions about this case. And she said, "Keep on investigating, ask all the questions you want, like whatever, like I fully support it." So I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, I want to ask you something. Are you sure they didn't know each other?"
Mm.
And she said, All Stacy ever told me about Rodney was that he would come into HEB when she was at work with his little girlfriend that he would bring in. Well, I knew who she was talking about, and I was like dumbstruck when she told me that because I'm sitting there thinking, but y'all have always said that
That
they
they
were
didn't know each
strangers,
other.
right? And she said, and that I mean, and it was one of those things where I asked it, and she immediately answered that. It wasn't like she didn't think about it. She didn't try to come up with what it was she was going to say or anything like that. It was immediate. Like, are you sure they didn't know each other? Well, all she ever said was that he used to come in HEB when she was at work. So my question then is, and I was not with it enough at the time because I was like, huh, but I wasn't with it enough at the time to even continue to question her. Like it didn't dawn on me to say like, well then so why have y'all always said they were strangers?
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't. I could kick myself because I feel like in having that conversation with her, and that was back before everything fell apart.
That
Um,
was round about the time of the first day of execution.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Because I think that was February, right, of
2015, I believe.
2015. Um, and so, and I want to say that I saw her in 2014 because my dad had passed away previously that year, and and I got to say that I did get a false sense of security in my relationship with her, because I expected her to be mad at me then.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like I expected her to be
When
mad
you
at
were
me
questioning then.
when I
Yeah.
asked, right? When I said, I just want you to know. Her response wasn't going to change what I was going to do because I had already made up my mind about that.
Right.
But I expected her to be mad then. I didn't expect her to grow into being mad. Like I didn't, I expected the blow up then. And there hasn't really been, like a huge, a huge blow up or anything like that. But it's just, I guess that's why it took me by such surprise when it did happen. And she didn't want anything to do with me because of this. Was because it like the timing wasn't right, like if you're going to be mad, I expected her to be react and be really upset when I went to talk to her about it. And I surely didn't expect her to say that Stacey had talked about Rodney. And then my other thing is Stacey was a very outgoing girl,
Right.
like never met a stranger, could strike up a conversation with anybody. She's not going to come home and tell her mom about somebody who just happened to chat her up in HEB.
Mm.
She saw lots of people in the course of her work.
She didn't tell her mom
There's,
about all of them.
thank you. There's a reason why she mentioned him.
Right.
And that's why I say I could just kick myself for not realizing, um, not really realizing what she was saying to me. And it didn't snap, I mean, it was months later that I was like, yeah, by the way, I went and talked to her and, wanted to tell her that I really think that he needs a new trial. And I'm still trying to figure out like whether he even got a fair trial or not, blah, blah, blah. And the person's like, what did she tell you? And I repeated it and was told, you need to go you need to go write an affidavit to give to his defense team. And I know that it's considered hearsay because it's what Stacey told her mom and then
Mm-hmm.
what her mom told me and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, that right there is when I was like, well, that's it. Like, I don't have any doubt in my mind now about his innocence. That's, like,
One of the things that I grew up hearing in Jamaica, one of our more popular sayings is, if it not go so, it go near so. Translated, if that's not how it goes, then there's something close to it.
right.
So
Yes.
even with it being hearsay, it is worth looking into.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that little bit of information there would have proven important, because here it is. Yes, she's saying that she knew of some type of connection between Rodney and Stacey. Everybody is
Right.
going off the argument that they didn't know each other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, if they didn't know each other, then there wouldn't be old sperm,
Right. Exactly.
right?
And I had somebody said to me, and it was such a valid point, is they said, well, she died in that apartment, and I'm pretty sure Rodney wasn't in there. And I was
Mm,
like, you know, you got a real valid point there. Because it's true. And if she died in Giddings, Rodney wasn't there.
right.
Because everybody talks about how he didn't have a car and all that kind of stuff. Um,
So,
it's
which is
just,
why David always says time of death is important.
hmm
That's the key to the case. That law enforcement person that you spoke about, a person who has been an investigator, a detective, him saying, well, I really believe that she died earlier than they are saying.
hmm
There are certain things that David picked up from the medical examiner's reports, and the pictures and everything, the doctored pictures also.
yeah. How crazy is that?
Yeah. Um, and some of these things, it's like it just flew over everybody's heads. The pooling of blood, um, the burning on Stacy, the burn
Right.
marks,
hmm
and why that would need to be. I believe you guys have somewhat of an autistic relative or something that was poking at her face at the
Oh, it was her brother, or
okay.
her half brother. Yeah, what was happening was he was sitting kind of on like a little stool there at the head of the casket,
Yeah.
and he kept messing with it, and messing with her face, like touching her lips and stuff like that. And um the lady from the funeral home came up to me and said, and this was before a lot of people had gotten there, she came up to me and said, "You've got to talk to him. He has to stop doing that." And I was like, "What?" And she said, "He keeps touching her." She said, "All that is wax that we've used, and it's getting hot, and we're going to have to close." She said, "I'm worried that the wax filling that they've used to fill in, like to make her face look even,
Mm-hmm.
I'm worried it's going to start melting. And if he keeps messing with it, it's going to like
Fall out
like
of
he's going to
place.
leave a he's going to leave like fingerprints in it, like marks, like indentions." And she was like, "If he doesn't stop, I'm just going to have to close the casket." And and so I went up to him. I was like, "You've got to stop touching her. You have to stop touching her. It's the wax, and the wax is going to melt." And he did it a couple of more times, and I walked over to her and I said, "Just go ahead and close it."
Hmm.
And she walked over and closed it. And that was one of the things that when I mentioned it to I did mention it to David, and gosh, probably I mentioned it to him probably like 8 months ago, because it always bothered me, but I didn't think it was important. There's all these things that happen that you just
Yeah.
don't think is important. Um, and he was like, "What do you mean wax?" And I was like, "Well, they had to build up some places on her face." And he was like, "I've never heard that before." I said, "Well, yeah, like like I'm not thinking anything about it." And he said, "Yeah, that's not in anything that he had ever seen, that there was that the trauma to her face was such that it had to be built back up."
Mm.
And so, yeah, there's just so many things like that were missed. And even the original medical examiner, Robert Biardo, He says that that if he, I don't even understand this. This man is completely, he's adult. But if he realized that the state was going to use his estimation of time of death like as a concrete fact, he would have advised them not to do so. Well, I thought that was a medical examiner's job, was to
Exactly.
give somebody an idea of when time of death was.
Exactly. Not only that, it's not like he was new to this.
Thank you. And that's the other thing that I don't understand, to be honest, is why doesn't him saying that, why doesn't that in itself trigger a new trial? I'm not versed enough in law
Yeah.
to understand the reasoning behind that, but there just seem to be so many things that that to me should mean that there should be a new trial. So many things, you know. um it's unbelievable to me that it's gone on this long. And I was talking earlier about how, because back when I was a proponent of the death penalty, which I'm
Hmm.
not anymore,
Hmm.
um but when I was, that was one of my things. I was like, I don't understand why it takes like 15, 16 years to execute these guys. Like, what the hell? I don't get it.
Right.
Well, I do now,
Hmm.
because it takes that long to shake out all the corruption.
Right.
Um,
And some of them, it just you they're not that lucky. It doesn't happen.
no.
Nathaniel Woods is one of those cases.
Hmm.
It and oh no, his name slips me now. The same judge signed his execution order,
Oh,
and
yes.
and and
Um,
and
Cameron Todd Willingham.
oh, that's
Is
another
it?
one, but it wasn't him.
Is it?
Swearinger,
Oh, Swearingen. Yes.
Swearingen. Yes,
Yes. Larry Swearingen, I
yes,
believe.
yes.
Yes. And they even said someone I'd seen where someone called him like the sleeping judge, because they actually had, and we even witnessed this when we were in the court in, I guess it was October of, was it 2017 maybe, when Michael Bodden, the medical examiner, testified on behalf of Reed about the time of death, that
Hmm.
that she had died earlier before midnight and all that kind of stuff. When we had that one, you could see Judge Shaver nodding off, like he wasn't even listening to all of it. Like,
Wow.
and
Didn't
no one
matter.
says anything, right? Like the attorneys don't say anything, and I can understand, like, I would think that maybe in that case, like, I could see the defense attorneys not wanting to say anything because you don't want to, invoke his wrath or anything like that, because you don't want him mad at you.
Right.
But surely, like, can the bailiff not be like, like, can we have a little buzzer or something over there that
Right.
kind of wakes him up, so at
Apparently
least he
they
doesn't
didn't
look like
care.
an
It
ass?
doesn't matter. He's king of the court.
Yeah. But yeah, he's over there falling asleep. And I really think that I don't think that he fully understood what Michael Bodden was saying.
Either
The
that or
other
he didn't really care.
He didn't really care because his mind was already made up. Yeah, you're probably right.
One of the
Yeah.
things that I'm coming to realize more and more in cases like these is those who are mixed up in it will stay in it to the very end.
Yeah.
If you listen to the show with Daniel Gutierrez
Hmm.
out of Arizona, his case, his conviction is a second in U.S. history to be voided. In all of U.S. judicial history, the second to be voided, because convictions don't get voided. But these guys stuck with it out to the very end.
Hmm.
And he had to fight and fight and fight and fight. And now he's still fighting to clear his name. You know,
Hmm.
we've seen this happen before. It is not unusual. These people don't get punished for making a mistake, quote unquote mistake.
Right. Right. And they should.
Exactly. But
They
it doesn't
should.
happen. Someone lose their life and they go, oh, well, new evidence says that maybe they didn't do it after all.
Hmm.
So, in to their family, we say, yeah, sorry.
Right.
Next.
And there's always the next one.
Yeah.
There's always the next one. And that's just, I know that one of the things that David talked about was uh, how the court-appointed attorneys actually work for the state. When he was explaining all that.
Right.
But I really thought that, and this is maybe me being naive, I just kind of thought, even with this case at the beginning, I didn't think that there was anything to worry about. They
Mm.
said they had DNA. No one talked about the quality of the DNA, just that they had DNA,
Yeah.
you know? And so then it wasn't really, like court appointed attorneys might work for the state, but they also don't get, at least in this case, they didn't have a lot of time to prepare. I think that,
That's not unusual based on what I've come across either.
yeah, yeah. But even the attorneys themselves said, like, we didn't get to prepare. We don't think that we were able to fully defend him. Well, it's your right to be able to have a vigorous defense.
Yes.
And so when the attorneys themselves are saying, we don't think that we did a good job, we didn't, or, and I don't understand this part either, is that in Reed's case, there were people that were supposed to testify on his behalf that either were never called or that the judge said, we're not going to hear your testimony.
Joy was one of those. Joy
Yes.
Monfort.
And Chris Aldridge was one of those too, because I believe that Chris was actually an alibi witness for him, for Rodney, because they apparently they stayed up. I believe, if I have the story correct, they had stayed up all night, kind of chatting there at that little, I guess at that little center, like youth center or like area there next to his house.
Mm-hmm.
And at 4:45, one of them went inside to actually check what time it was, because they knew they had to be to work the next day. Or the next day.
Later
It was like
on.
4:45 in the morning. They had to be to work like at 7 or 7:30 or whatever. So it's things
Well,
like
that's a
that.
name that I hadn't heard before. I might need I might need to get
Okay.
connected with him.
Yeah. His name is Chris Aldridge, and he was one of the ones that I believe was supposed to testify. Um, and they said that they wouldn't be needing his testimony. And then the other thing was with his mom. His mom wasn't allowed to be in the courtroom, and I believe it was because they were supposed to call her to testify. And so I guess she couldn't hear the proceedings, and then they ended up never calling her. And I think they put her under a gag order so that she couldn't talk about it. If I'm not
Really?
mistaken. Yeah, I believe that is what was explained to me, actually
I
by
did not know
by
that.
Mrs. Reed. Yeah, so she didn't get to be in the courtroom when he was being tried.
Huh. But isn't that interesting though? The
Right?
the people that could provide an alibi
Uh huh.
don't get to. And
Right.
the person that, because based on what I know, and I don't profess to know a lot, but based on what I know, the persons closest to the victim are usually the first to be investigated,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to crimes of passion.
Right.
Um, but there wasn't a whole lot of investigation into Jimmy.
Mm-mm.
other things that happened is the alleged suicide of one of those initial investigating officers.
Yes, Ed Salmela.
Yeah.
Yes.
With a firearm that he already turned in to the police department.
Right, and I think in his left temple, and he was right-handed
And he
or
was
something like
right-handed.
that. Yeah.
So these other things come into play, but yes, there are other things, but they're a part of the whole.
Yes.
And me, as I'm no doctor, I'm a DJ, and so it's not a DR. Just so that I'm clear. I try to make it clear every week. But one, as far as I know, could either be 11 or 2, depending
Right.
on how you put them together.
Right.
So, with these little bits and pieces, that it's not like they're really hidden anyway. Because if you can pull them up in documents that are filed, then they're not really hidden.
They're not.
The question
But you-
is, why aren't they presented? But
like right altogether. Like
yes,
if you look at the totality of all these little circumstances, it becomes a really strong case that Rodney Reed did not do this.
yeah. And
You know?
worst case scenario, reasonable doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Worst case, reasonable doubt. And how are you gonna try to execute someone with reasonable doubt? That doesn't happen.
No. And I think that really because what I have heard what I've heard from her mom and sisters
Yes.
in regard to me is they say a lot of, but she wasn't at the trial. If she had been at the trial, she would think he was guilty too. And I do see where they're coming at, where they're coming from with that.
Yeah.
The reason why they say that is because everything was like, I almost feel like they're going on what was said at the original trial and not any of the new information that has since come out. You know? So, and as an example, like at the trial, it was very scandalous, the things that were purported to have been done to her by Reed. And I blame the medical examiner for it. Because, for example, like what started out as being like an abrasion, like in her rectal area,
Right.
as the district attorney or the state's attorney, Lisa Tanner, like every time she mentions it again, it becomes worse and worse, like by degrees, so that by the end, it's called a laceration.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? So then when other medical examiners have looked at the photographs, they're like, that's nothing. Like that's just, it's like this little mark. But the way it was presented was that she was sodomized.
Right.
Right. And so the defense didn't do a good job of questioning him so that all those things were brought out. Or they've discovered now that the science that was used at the time, what was testified to, was a bunch of BS. Like, you know what I'm talking about? Like that the sperm don't stay for this amount of time, and
Right.
oh no, you can never have them longer than 23 hours and all this kind of stuff. And then they find out that's not true.
Right.
And so it's just like everything hangs on the science of it. And I agree. Probably if I were at that original trial, you
Hmm.
wouldn't be talking to me on the phone, you know?
I believe so because I have had run-ins with people commenting on my previous shows,
Hmm.
on on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook,
Right.
various platforms. Um, People have commented and they keep going back to, have you read the court transcripts? Where have you been paying attention to what they said in the courts? And I'm like, have you guys listened to any of the people that I spoke to
Hmm.
that have either been there, grew up there, or studied the
Right.
documents?
Right.
Because one thing I realized about David, he doesn't really care how you look. He's
Right.
looking at the black and white. He's looking at papers, and
Uh-huh.
he's going off what is on the paper. And the
Yes.
papers have a certain bit of consistency to it, and what they add up to is not what we're looking at right now happening.
Right. And do you know, I don't know if he brought this up to you in the subsequent show, uh, but one of the things is that you know how he always like he'll make those records requests
Yes.
and he'll make records requests. So there has been 2 or 3 times when when he's made a records request and he gets it and he goes through it with a fine-tooth comb because there will be like this random page in there mixed in with everything else that's very important that was never given to the defense.
Right.
And it has happened over and over
Yep.
and over again. Now, if you're all above board, to me, somebody makes a record request, you just inundate them with all the stuff that you have. Get it out of the way.
Apparently
Quit this little
that's not how
piddly
it
thing.
works. No. Apparently that's not how it works.
Like, because I know he's very specific in his requests.
Yeah.
But he's told me that he finds like this little random piece of paper that if you don't know all the ins and outs of what has happened, like if you don't know the case like he does,
Right.
that when you see that piece of paper, you don't think it's anything. But
Mm-hmm.
he picks it up and he's like, "Oh, well, you know what this means? This means that this one way back here that I requested in 2012, that means that they were lying about this one back here." And because
Well, it's
to
just
be
like
able to do
sending
that,
the DNA off to California to get tested.
right? And then they don't get anything. It's like this
Right.
it's this circle of, well, we didn't get anything. Well, you didn't get anything because nothing ever went.
Nothing was
And that's
sent.
right. And I don't understand how that can have gone on this whole time and um, not be uh, explained until now. You know,
Well,
like who answers for this stuff?
just like in previous cases where people have been exonerated because, let's use a famous case, for example, the Central Park Five.
Yeah.
Okay, they're out, they're exonerated. They went through hell, but nobody got punished.
I know.
Oh, well, I guess we made a mistake, sorry. And on it goes. It it requires people holding people accountable. It requires family members like you saying,
Mhm.
"Hey, wait a minute. This is my family member that's the victim. But something doesn't add up here." And to be honest about it and to speak out, not just because there's a patsy and we're going to go and
Right.
somebody's going to get punished. Joy talked about how Bastrop, the town of Bastrop, operates.
Hmm.
And someone someone took me to task about it. Oh, so because one white person says they were looked at funny because they were sitting with a black person in a restaurant, that the whole town is racist. And I had to be like, hello, wait a minute. Did you grow up there? Have you ever been there? Who are you to say something about what she is saying?
Mm-hmm.
I can't dispute it. This is the person who lived it. Why am I
Yeah.
going to dispute? I'm not going to dispute that. I'm going to take exactly what they said.
Well, I kind of feel like when they asked me, do I think that race had a part to play in this whole thing with Rodney Reed being convicted? Well, first of all, I'm not black, so I can't really speak to the role that I think race had to play in it. I do believe that Jimmy Fennell is a racist,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that the reason why he was so pissed was because he's a racist and Rodney's black. You see what I'm saying? That's the role that I think it had to play. And I also think that that he and his cronies thought that Reed was a good scapegoat because they were pissed off. Like, what better thing is there would there be than to kill your fiance and frame up the guy that she was sleeping with? You know, but that's their racism.
Mm-hmm.
So because like that's one thing that people ask me, and I try to answer it the best I can.
Right.
But I've never lived in Bastrop, and I'm not black, so I
Right.
don't know how racist Bastrop is. But I know I can pretty much say that Jimmy Fennell's a racist.
No, that's good enough for me. Thanks.
You
What
know, but
What do
yeah,
you say
that's
though about the findings that indicate that Stacey was pregnant?
okay. So I gotta say I had never heard that until very early on. David Fisher told me that my aunt told him that. I had not heard that. And I know that he said that it alludes to it in the
Medical examiner.
autopsy.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the autopsy report. Um, and the first time I read it, like I had to look up some words because I was not sure what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I had interpreted it was that the that it showed that she had been at least pregnant in the past. I didn't read it like she was I
Pregnant at the
didn't
time.
I didn't interpret it like she was pregnant at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But he told me that my aunt had shared that with him.
Mm.
Um because very early on he spoke to her. He spoke to my aunt a few times when he was first looking into it all. But like that's not something that was ever said to any of the extended family.
Right.
I don't know what her sisters say about that or anything, but
Mm-hmm.
that was not anything that was said to the extended family. It it wouldn't like it wouldn't really surprise me. I mean, and whether it if she were, whether it was Jimmy or Rodney's or whatever, because I would think that only she would have been able to figure out by dates
Right.
whose it was. But that's not ever something that's been brought up in our family, was that she was pregnant at the time of her
Mm-hmm.
death. So, but like I said, I don't understand all the autopsy report either.
Hey,
You know, so
listen, I'm
um,
I'm right there with you. You may as well be a DJ just like me.
right. Well, I am a pre-K teacher, right? So therefore, that's why I stayed with the little ones. Um, but yeah, I don't know. That's not anything that, like I said, that we had ever discussed.
Yeah.
And when he told me about it, it didn't surprise me um that my aunt had said that. It kind of surprised me that we had not heard that.
Mm.
That if that was the case, that we hadn't heard that, because I would think that at the time that would have made it even more um, horrible than it already was.
Right.
You know, um, like that it would have come out somehow. But it could be, but I don't know what my aunt would share about that and what she wouldn't share about that, you know?
Right. Right.
So I'm not sure about that.
Okay. But you see, it's these little things,
Yeah,
that, hey, why wasn't this brought up? Why wasn't this the cross examination done, asking about this? Why wasn't?
yeah,
And hindsight is 2020. We can look back
right.
and ask, why wasn't? Only way to fix that is to have a new trial.
Hmm. Right. And so I don't understand what they're so afraid of, really. Like, are they concerned about the cost? They've been housing him for,
No, they're afraid
22
of the
years now.
exposure.
They're afraid of the exposure, and also because, I mean, think about it, because the amount of corruption is crazy. And I think that there's a lot of people that don't want to be taken down
Oh
over
no.
this, you know? One of the things, when we were talking about the investigation and how I thought that the guy, like that Rocky Wardlow, um, didn't interview people or talk to people on purpose. There was a man that he has since passed away, but he lived underneath Jimmy and Stacy. So he lived next door to Carol and under Jimmy and Stacy.
Right.
And he said that he heard them fighting and squabbling and yelling and screaming all the time, which goes against what everybody says about, or what her family says about, he was such a loving, they were such a loving couple and
Right.
so in love and stuff. So, but
Yeah.
that's just kind of you're not really, you're going to not even interview the guy underneath. Hell, for
Nope.
all they know, he was sitting in a lawn chair and saw her leave that night. You know what I'm saying? Like, but they didn't ask. So, and my understanding is that he waited for people to come ask him, and he even went up to somebody, and when all the officers were there at the house, and he realized what had happened, and they just kind of blew him off. So that
Mm.
kind of tells me that they never really had Jimmy in their sights anyway about all this.
Oh, they were a part of the cover up.
Hmm. Well, yeah, they sent home, like, they gave him all her belongings. Yeah, I mean, like, all the stuff that was in
Yeah.
the bag, they just sent it home with him. They're not even going to dust the outside for prints.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Even yeah.
It's just, and I think like, in the grand scheme of things, that it pisses me off that they didn't respect her as enough as a victim to really look at him. Because,
Because their focus was on who they were going to target as the perpetrator.
hmm
If you pay attention to the victim, if you pay closer attention to the victim, then you're going to see more inconsistencies.
yeah,
Like, why was her parts of her body burnt
hmm
that you have to
nobody's
be waxing to fill it? And
Nobody has even interviewed. What I want to know is, where did her body go for those hours between when it left the crime scene or the dump site? Where did her body go from the time it left that site to the time that it got to Austin? Because it took way too long for it to get there. It was a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours before it was even signed in. It doesn't take that long to get there. And no one ever
really?
questioned. Yeah, yeah. They have it leaving and not getting over to the medical examiner's office in Austin for, I want to say, it's like 3 hours. Because that's one of the things that David first explained to me. And I'm like, nobody asked the ambulance drivers or the more drivers or whatever it is. I don't even know the official term.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody thought to ask them, where the hell were y'all? No,
Yeah, that
nothing.
you see? Again,
Yeah.
in a tone described the way it was, because I feel like I pretty much know Bastrop now. I almost feel like I know Bastrop the way when Joy walked me through Bastrop,
Hmm.
a town where everybody knows just about everybody.
Yes.
Rodney had an uncle that was murdered in Bastrop for, I think, dating a white woman or talking to a white woman or something like that. You know, and that was years ago.
Right.
When you are walked through Bastrop by Joy, when you listen to Joy talk about her experience,
Hmm.
and Joy is not, Joy is white.
Right.
And she said her father was pretty much a white supremacist kind of a guy. You know, she
Hmm.
she has all the experience of both sides to tell you exactly how it is. And she did tell us exactly how it is. So for me, the fact that race plays a part in this, it's very much plausible for me.
Hmm.
I won't say that's how it should be for everybody. Take what you want.
Hmm.
For me, it plays a part. For me, a lot of corruption is all over this. Corruption and cover up. When you have someone like Jimmy Finnell who has a history of being violent,
Yeah.
just coming out of prison for rape and abduction, these things kind of match up with what happened to Stacey.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I believe someone said that they heard him threaten her that if she cheated on him again, that he was gonna strangle her with his belt or something like.
Yeah, when he was in, I think when he was in classes for the academy or something, that there was a lady that was also in the academy that he had said that if he found out his girlfriend was ever cheating on him, he would strangle her with a belt.
And
And
there was a belt found by the
right,
truck in the school parking lot.
right. You know where the other part of the belt was? So the other part of the belt was on the side of the road um, where she was found, and it pointed like it was laid there, and it pointed to exactly where she was back in the
In the brush?
brush area. Uh-huh. So it looked like a line, like the straight part of an arrow.
Mm-hmm.
It was laid like it, and like if you drop a belt, it doesn't fall like that. You know what I mean? Like if you ever take a belt off and just drop it on the ground,
Yeah.
it doesn't fall in a straight line. But you know how like you can kind of drag it a little bit and then place it and it'll straighten and you can put it down. That's the way it looks like it's laying in the road. Like they needed to mark the spot.
Mm. So many things that they could have looked into and didn't.
Hmm. Yeah, because if they look into it, then like you were saying, then it shows all the cover up on stuff.
Yeah.
It's a shame that it really bothers me when I start thinking about all the missed opportunity or or supposed missed opportunity, which was really, we're not going to look into it any more than this. And also the amount of just blind faith we have in this concept, you know, and I mean, and probably like depending on who your audience is, like for me, I had like this blind faith in the justice system
Right.
that they had found the right guy and everything was going to work out okay. When you talk to somebody from Bastrop, whether they're white or black, they probably don't really have that kind of faith. I guess it depends on how they feel about certain things and who they kind of, align themselves with and stuff. Like if you align yourself with the establishment, you're probably pretty sure that everything's going to work out okay,
Right.
you know. But, if you're black or if you're knowledgeable about the the injustices done because of the endemic racism, then you see it a completely different way. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I get so frustrated about,
Yeah.
because yeah, you can't really look like hindsight's 2020, like you were saying. But even, I think back now and I'm kind of like, maybe I should have gone to the original trial, you know? Um, but I really feel like not going, and not just that, but being related to her, but not so closely related like a sister is,
Yeah.
allows me to have like a little bit of objectivity
Mm-hmm.
about it,
Yeah.
which is why I think I feel the way I do, is because I'm looking at it as, like I've grieved my cousin, but now I kind of look at it like she didn't get justice, you know?
Mm-hmm.
N- People didn't pick up on it. Or if they did, then they didn't do anything at the time. So now, all these years along, I feel like I believe she was a victim of domestic violence.
Yeah.
I believe that she was a victim of violence by her partner.
And
And so,
given
yeah.
given his history,
Hmm.
it's not far fetched.
No, I was when you were talking earlier, about how he had a tendency, he was prone to violence and he had been in prison for a rape. When that first happened, and I found out about it, I went to look for him on social media because one of Stacey's sisters had said that that he had remember MySpace?
Yeah.
That's how long ago this was. Um, but that his MySpace, whenever you looked at it, that it was like it was very degrading toward women, like women in dog collars and men overpowering women and all that kind of stuff was all over his MySpace page, and they shut it down, like they pulled it.
Mm.
Um, and because I remember like looking for it, and I saw it once, and then when I went back to look for it again, it was
Gone.
already gone. But it was very degrading towards women, like the images and stuff that he had posted on there. And so, and you don't just grow like somebody doesn't just turn that way overnight,
Right.
you know? So, so just just the whole idea that he was arrested for, and did prison time. And actually, he actually did a plea, um, to where it was like, sexual misconduct with a person in custody or some kind of thing like that. Um, but he was originally arrested for, I think, sexual assault and kidnapping was what the
Yeah.
original, charges were. And that's not far fetched. Like when somebody has that kind of belief system that they're posting all that on their social media and everything, then that's what they believe. But he's a pastor now, so I feel better about it.
He's what?
He's a pastor. He's a like he found Jesus when he was in prison,
The
apparently.
same Jimmy Fennell?
Yeah, he's an ordained minister.
Well, I'm not saying that, you can't change your behaviors or anything, but if he's a pastor, no, then his conscience should be killing him.
Right? That's what I say. Cuz yeah, I don't know.
Ooh,
And what my
jeez,
aunt
Heather,
said
come on now. How
when
could
I
you
s-
do this to us?
when I spoke to my aunt way back in when I talked to her about the Reed case, and she told me that that Stacey had talked about Rodney, I asked her, I said, so all this stuff with Jimmy, what do you think? And all that she would say was that it was very unfortunate. That's all she would say about it.
Wait, which part of it is very unfortunate?
About when I asked her about how she felt about Jimmy with him having been arrested for the sexual assault and all that kind of stuff. And she said that it was unfortunate.
You know what?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying not to be rude to your aunt.
Yeah.
Mm.
I love her. I love my aunt. But that's just so, like, I don't know. And there's a part of me that wants to kind of want to make excuses like, well, is she scared of Jimmy? Like, I don't understand. I don't get it. But how can, like, I don't understand. I don't understand that kind of being oblivious.
You know, maybe there's even a little bit more to living in Bastrop than we have been made privy to. You know,
Maybe.
maybe there is a bit of stranglehold on members of that community by the police force or those in power,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
with it being such a tight knit community. You know, that could be just my crime drama mind at work, but you know, when I listen to recall things that Joy talks about, listening to you looking at what has happened in this case, you know, there's just too much. Hearing how your aunt reacts to some of these things,
Mm-hmm.
there's for me there's a lot of race coming into play. There's a lot of power, and what can I say? There's a bit of power play and authoritarianism.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it just seems almost plantationish.
Yeah. I and earlier when I was saying that, like, when people ask me about the race, and I can't really speak on it. Like, I just don't think that I have the right
No,
I
I get it.
I think it plays a role, but, like, for example, like, I don't think, like, I could only talk about, um like, for example, if you and I were walking down the street in Bastrop,
Mm-hmm.
I would pick up on your feelings about it, but I'm very well aware of my white privilege.
Right, right,
Like, I get it. I understand white privilege, and that I benefit from it.
right.
And I think that that's one of the, I think that there is just a big disconnect, um, with that whole concept of white privilege. And people might say, like, well, yeah, I kind of get it and everything, but they don't realize that the flip side of it is that it means that you're not targeted. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that in this case, I believe that Reed was targeted because of his relationship with Stacey,
Yeah.
and they knew that they could get away with it because of the political climate in Bastrop.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But, like when they say, well, do you feel like race plays a part? I think I always feel kind of like I can't really speak on that because
Yeah.
I don't experience that. I
Right. Right.
witness that, but I don't experience that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the difference.
Right. Listen, Heather.
Yes.
Thank you.
You are very welcome,
Thank
and
you.
you were right. It does go fast, doesn't it?
I told you.
Yeah, that's it's just shocking, actually.
I told you. I haven't been wrong about that yet.
No, I mean, I told my husband before I walked in here, I was like, he seems to think that I have 2 hours worth to talk about, but I don't. So I don't know what we're going to do at about, about an hour in. And he was like, okay, good luck with that. But no, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity
Yeah,
to talk about it. I just feel like in order to get justice for her, we've got to start with getting justice
for
for
Rodney.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
let the journey
thank you.
continue.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll speak to you soon.
Definitely.
Thank you.
You take care. Be safe.
You too. Bye bye.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, what can I say? Heather Campbell Stobbs, cousin of the late Stacey Stites. And she says, hey, I really believe Rodney needs a new trial. And I'm right there with her. So, in order to get justice for Stacey, we need to get justice for Rodney. What are you going to do? Everybody that is listening, everybody that is watching, what are you going to do? Are you going to go with whatever you read based on the court transcripts? Or are you going to look a little bit deeper than what is being said and look at what is not being said? Are you going to ask the questions that people like David Fisher have been asking? Are you going to say he's a quack, a whack job, a Looney Tune? Or are you going to say, wait a minute, he may be onto something here? Maybe, just maybe, there is reasonable doubt. If there's reasonable doubt, Rodney doesn't need to be where he is. And there's more than reasonable doubt. So, what are you going to do? A similar case is Julius Jones. And I say similar because he didn't do it. What are you going to do? Stand for something or fall for anything? You choose. I'm past my time. I gotta get out of here. I won't even get to have musical therapy tonight. I'll make it up to you tomorrow. You guys, if you are from the Caribbean, want to be in the Caribbean, know anything about the Caribbean, check out Island Space. Do check it out. Thank you to Pulse Media Group. Thank you to Althea and her Healing Heavenly Hands. Thank you to Reggae Global Entertainment. Thank you to GMAT Music Solutions. On behalf of the Night Shift and everybody associated with it, I bid you all adieu. Good morning, good afternoon, good day to you wherever you are in the world. From right here in South Florida, I say good night. And, let me not break things. Let me try to get out of here with just this little commercial. For those of you keeping abreast, again, this is a Night Shift. I'm out. Greetings and salutations, one and all. You're invited to tune in to the Night Shift with DJ Kevin Stew. It airs on Mondays with Community and Finance, Tuesdays with Healthy Love, and Wednesdays with Real Talk from 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Come spend some time interacting in the stew pot where we keep things bubbling and wind down in musical therapy. The Night Shift with DJ Kevin Stew is on kevinstew.com, where you're encouraged to have acceptance through enlightenment.